Hey guys, Stevenson at Homes by Sun with Remax, back again for another weekly real estate market review. And this week, I have quite a bit to unpack, as they say. We're going to talk about the market. We're going to talk about some recent news, and we are going to talk about a topic that I have received quite a few questions in regards to. And that is, I have a lot of investor clients, and they often ask me, hey, what should I do if I want to sell my investment property that's got a tenant in it? So today I want to go over some of the concerns that we have in regard to selling the property with a tenant, and also some suggestions as to what you should watch out for if you're in that situation. So, and before we begin, if you like these videos, if you find these useful, please do me a favor and hit the subscribe button below if you're watching on YouTube, or leave a comment. Let me know what part of it is the best part for you. And if you have any questions, be sure to leave it in the comment section wherever you're watching this. So let me share my screen. All right, so first thing we're going to look at is we're going to look at some of the major headlines recently that are in the news. A lot of the headlines are saying Toronto housing market cools, market is slower. Another headline says slightly more balanced market on the way for G.T.A this spring. Prices are more stable right now. Demand and supply is more balanced, so prices are not rising as quick. Here's another headline: uncertainty in the world could be cooling real estate market. Certainly the market has cooled in the last couple of weeks. I wouldn't say that it has dropped a lot for majority of the area. It has certainly dropped for areas that are a little bit further outside of the core. However, I'm still hearing a lot of activities in Durham area. We just last week sold a townhouse in Aurora, and we got 11 offers. It really depends on the product. It really depends on how well the property shows. Buyers are still out there, but as you will see when we go over the numbers, there are a lot more listings. So they have a lot more options these days. And as a seller, you can no longer bank on the fact that, oh, there are tons of buyers out there. I don't need to do anything. I'll just list it and the house is going to sell for a really high amount. That's not happening right now. The properties that are selling have gone through a lot of refreshing, a lot of staging, a lot of fixing up, in order to show its true potential. It's no longer the case where you can just stick a sign on the lawn and the house will sell. You need to do a lot of preparation and work with a real professional, someone that is going to take the time to prepare your property before it goes on the market. I have all my listings, on average, they take about 3 to 4 weeks, sometimes 2 to 3 months before they are on the market, because we want to make sure that we show off the property with its best potential while not spending an outrageous amount of money. Now, the last headline I want to show you is something I never thought of, but I find it quite interesting. Here's an article from Motley Fool. It says how skyrocketing gas prices affecting the real estate market. That, to me, it sounds kind of relevant, as people who live in the core, like Toronto core, consider moving out to further outskirt areas. Gas prices before 2022 was kind of pretty cheap, very reasonable and affordable. So people were willing to move to further out, even if they have to work in the city, and they would rather commute, but they want to own a large property outside of GTA. That we're seeing maybe the recent slowdown of the market is because people are now reconsidering that plan. They're saying, I can't afford to do this even 2 to 3 times a week. Is quite a bit. If the drive is an hour and a half away, that's a lot of gas. And so that might be a reason why some pockets and outskirts are seeing no activities at all, very little. It's because people are reconsidering whether they should do that move to increase the distance of their commute. So keep that in mind. That's also something, the interest rate increase, potential increase coming, as well as the war. All these factors are going to affect the market in the short term. But I do believe this year, the market is still going to rise, probably not as much as the first couple of months, but overall, we will see a rise in the market because people can hold off their move for only so long. And now they, after maybe 2 to 3 months of pausing, they're going to say to themselves, we have to do this move. We can't hold off for any longer. Let's do it. And so I anticipate that we're still going to have a pretty good 2022. Right now, it's just maybe a slight dip. And if you're in the market right now, take advantage of this. Go take a look at some of the property that don't show too well and make an offer. And I'm sure you're going to get a good price and you can just fix up yourself, hire a contractor. It's not that hard, right? So let's go into our weekly chart and talk about what happened the week before. So we're looking at line 12, week number 12 now, and we can see that compared to the week before, we had 33% more listings. And that's almost 1,000 listings more, around 800 listings more than the week before. Now, let me remind you, the week before, March 12 to 18, was March break. And every year, right after March break, we see a big influx of listings. That's because a lot of people, a lot of parents especially, take the March break off to prepare their property, and then they put it up for sale the week after. And if they were planning to sell and they were going to list the week before March break, they would say to themselves, hey, why don't we do it after March break? Because the kids are home, they don't want to impact the kids so much. And also March break gives them a little bit more time to stay home, to clean up, to pack away stuff. So every year, right after March break, we see an influx. And the number of transactions actually fell. It's because a lot of agents, maybe they were away, they didn't show the clients property the week before, and now they just came back. So they're not really ready to work. A lot of them are not ready to work, or they need a little bit more time to show properties to their client before they will make a deal. So that's why we see a pretty big, let me see, we see a gap here. Right here, we see a gap, and that's pretty wide, and that explains why there is a drop in the price. Let me just clear this and stop. And I'll scroll up and let's talk about the average price. Now, the average price, I could do this, there we go. The average price has come down, but the rate of decrease has slowed down. The week before it came down this way, it's pretty fast, and now it's kind of stable. What I've calculated is the difference between the peak And this, it's only about 8%. So it's not a big drop. We are still at the height of the market. It's just that maybe we're not going to keep hitting peak month after month, but we're going to have a little bit of a dip and might go back up again as the number of inventory slows down. The reason why they may slow down is because a lot of sellers decided to put their house up after March break, and if it doesn't sell, they're actually going to take the listing off the market, either not getting the price that they were hoping to get, or they don't want to be amongst so much competition, so they're going to pull back and take the listing off the market. So I'm anticipating that the number of listings is actually going to start to come down, and some more buyers are going to jump back into the market. One interesting thing to note is the number of transaction over asking is still at around 80%, and that's still much higher than the usual. Usually they sit around 60 something to 70%. We're still at 80%. A lot of properties, although didn't get the price that they wanted, I'm seeing more of them try a second offer date and they actually get multiple offers. So if the first offer date comes and go no offers, a lot of them are either relisting still at a low price and try another offer date, and they're actually quite successful. So the average home price for the week before is $1,532,000 versus $1,547,000 the week before. Slight drop, not too much, and we should see this number hopefully goes back up or more level from this point onward. Let's take a look at condo side. The condo side kind of reflects the freehold side. We had an increase of number of listing, 906 listing that came out in Toronto, and we had a dip of number of transaction, 478 in Toronto. Same reasoning. A lot of listings got posted right after March break, and a lot of agents were probably away, so they weren't working as much. So a number of transactions came down. The percentage of over asking, 75% historically for condo, that's very high. It is still very high. We are seeing condos which are under 700K getting lots and lots of action, lots of offers, and condos over $1 million is probably quieter. So anywhere between 700 to $1 million is the sweet spot. A lot of people can afford that, and so they would want to go for that. In terms of the average price, let me take a look at, scroll up here. There we go. The average price for condo hasn't really changed much. It's been quite stable, went down just tiny bit. I wouldn't even call that a much of a drop. It just due to the number of transactions that's less, and that's why we're seeing this. Let me just erase this. There we go. So that's the state of the condo market, and not much change in the rental market. I know some reports are saying that rental rates have gone up. When I'm looking at many of the downtown buildings, or especially in Toronto, rents haven't really gone up. They might have changed by $50, $100, but not that big of a change. We will go over that next week. I don't have the numbers for the week last week. We'll take a look at rentals the week after. And now I wanted to take a look at the topic for this week that I have prepared for you. And that's to talk about what happens when investor, a landlord wants to sell a tenanted property? What should the landlord be aware of? There is often a misconception is that a lot of the landlord ask me, can I ask the tenant to move out when I want to sell? Like, is it legal? Can I give them notice? And that's a big no. You wanting to sell your unit is not a reason for asking the tenant to leave. There are more than 4 reasons, but these are the big 4 reasons why a landlord can evict a tenant. It is for cost, if there's damages, if they don't pay your rent, if they're causing nuisance, causing disturbance to other tenants, if they are disrespectful, they are breaking the law, things like that, you can apply to evict them. Second big one is the landlord plans to do major renovation, and you really have to do major renovation. The renovation has to be so big that the unit will be pretty much destroyed, and it needs to take out a permit. But even with that reason, the tenant has the option, or you must give the tenant the option to move back in after the renovation. So that's not a good reason to evict the tenant if you want to sell. The third one is the landlord requires it for their own immediate family use. I have clients that ask me, what if I tell him that I want to use it myself, kick him out, leave it vacant for a couple of months, and then renovate it and then sell it? Maybe by the time I close, it will be like a few months down the road. I would tell them, don't do that. It is against the law. The tenant has the right to claim the landlord for a penalty of about $35,000. So it is not worth it to take this risk. Tenant can easily find out that you didn't move in, because once you post it for sale, you obviously didn't move back in, and they can go to the landlord and tenant board and sue you. The fourth big reason is the unit is sold and the purchaser requires it for their own use or immediate family use. Now with this one, the key point being the unit is sold, which means while it's being sold, while it's selling, you can't kick the tenant out. Once it's sold, if you do all the proper steps, you can apply to evict the tenant. But still, even with all the notices, the tenant is not obligated to leave. And it does actually say on the notices that they don't have to leave if they want to challenge this. So selling a tenanted property, we're going to run into some potential issues. These are the big 4. Number 1 is tenant restricting showings. They want to be there all the time. And they said, well, I'm only going to give you 2 hours per week to show. I've had tenant that says every week I only give you 1 hour. So really limited amount of showings. Most tenants don't want visitors when they're home. But then on the flip side, many tenants want to be there when people come and visit. So you can see how that can be challenging as well. If they are out all the time, let's say they're students or they work, then you pretty much can't show the property for the whole day, maybe only a couple hours at night or in the late afternoon when they get home, and then they'll block the showings again. So you're going to have a lot of trouble showing the unit, which in turn means that you cannot accommodate all the potential buyers, and some of them are going to skip your unit because it's too hard to see it, and they're going to buy something else. Unit also doesn't show well. With the tenant there, obviously we can stage it, we can repaint the unit, we can put stuff away. They are not going to clean up their unit for you to show. They're just going to live the way they live. So the unit is not going to show well, and you might scare off some potential buyers. with the tenant there, it also limits the number of buyers that you can attract, because if, let's say, you have a lease there and the lease runs for another 3-4 months, that means that the buyer cannot move in right away. And even if you don't have a lease, you still have to give the tenant 60 days notice. And so there could be a couple of potential buyer willing to pay the price that you asked for, but they need the unit within 30 days. You cannot accommodate that. So you can see that because we are not so flexible, we're going to lose out on some potential buyers. And the last one is the most serious one, and the one that I will address a little bit more, is that the tenant doesn't move out on closing day. Now, most contract in Ontario has a clause that says on closing day, you must give vacant possession. Vacant possession means that the unit has to be completely free of people and things. You need to take everything out that isn't part of the sale and give a nice, clean, vacant unit to the buyer. But if you have a tenant that doesn't want to move out, we have a big problem, because you can't give vacant possession. The closing can't happen, basically. So some suggestion is always better to sell vacant. Vacant unit allows you to show easier, allows for very flexible closing, and also you can fix it up, you can dress it up and make it show really nice. Negotiate with the tenant to leave earlier. So when you decide that you want to sell the unit, the best thing to do is approach a tenant and just talk to them, see where their heads are at, see if there's a potential they can move out, and entice them. Next point is compensate tenant for the moving costs. You might say to them, hey, I'm going to pay for your moving costs, however much that is, $2,000, $3,000, if you will move out and let me sell the unit. Explain to them that you don't want to interrupt their life with all the showing, because we do have the rights for showing, but you don't want to interrupt that. And also, by them already moving out, they can be sure that they won't need to have to move out suddenly. Now they have time to plan, because the unit hasn't been sold yet, so they have time to plan their move. So explain that to them and give them some money, give them some incentive for them to move out. Find an alternative accommodation for the tenant. That is, if you have the ability to look for other similar units within, let's say, within the condo building or nearby, and suggest to them that maybe you will pay the difference in rent for 1 year or 2 years for them to move to that unit. That's also something you can suggest as well. Or just be their reference, give them a good reference and say, here, go and rent that unit, and once you move out, allow me to sell the unit. And so let's talk about what happens when the tenant doesn't leave on closing day. It has happened many times before. It's usually when the landlord thinks that they have a really good tenant, and the tenant has been really nice to the landlord because they want to stay, and all of a sudden the tenant finds out that the landlord has sold the unit and is asking them to move out, and they're upset, or they think they cannot find a similar place for similar rent. Rents have gone up, or there aren't any inventory around for them to move. So it's very problematic for the seller and the buyer. This is because we can't give vacant possession. So if you can't give vacant possession and the buyer asks for it, you can't close. And so because this is due to the seller's fault, you didn't deal with the tenant before, So the buyer can really sue for damages. As I said before, even if you give the notices, the prerequisite notices, tenants is still not obligated to move out. They can apply to the board and they can delay the whole eviction process. There's not much you can do about it. There was a recent case on the news. Landlord sold the property and was supposed to close last October, and it's March now. It's 5 months later, and they're still waiting for a hearing with the landlord and tenant board. Their buyer has delayed the closing 2 times already and threatens that they can close by, I think it's end of this month or next month, that they're going to cancel the contract and they're going to sue the seller. So it's very, very important to resolve that the tenancy issue before you sell it. Oftentimes, you can pay the tenant off, and the amount that the seller can pay the tenant varies. Minimum, you have to pay them 1 month's rent if you're asking them to move out, regardless what reason. But also, many landlords are giving them $20,000, $30,000 just to move out, because in this day and age, unless it's a very, very tiny unit, you're getting maybe $800K, $900K. So the tenants know that. The tenants know that the landlords probably have appreciated. A lot of them are using this to bargain with the landlord. If you happen to have one of those tenants, it's just very unlucky, but pay them off. It will save you a lot more money than being sued for not being able to deliver the unit on closing. Seller has to pay for any damages caused due to tenant. What that means is, if they don't move out and finally in the very last minute you negotiate with them, you pay them up, then they move out, you still have to fix up the unit before you give to the buyer. So you can see it's very troublesome. And it's a big issue if the tenant stays on closing, and it does happen. So keep that in mind. And I have some final thoughts on this topic. If you have a tenant, you can actually cross out on page 1 of the agreement purchase and sale at the very bottom where it says, unless otherwise stated, vacant possession is to be provided to the buyer. That sentence, you can actually cross it out so that you're not promising vacant possession. And you should include a clause that the buyer will move in. So the buyer is actually swearing that once this is closed, they are going to move in. So that's a good clause to have. Otherwise, it's $35,000 claim. Like I said, if you give the notice to the tenant, tell them that the buyer is going to move in, but the buyer doesn't move in turn, they post it for rent 2 months later, the tenant can sue the buyer as well. So make sure you have, or sue the old landlord as well. So make sure you include a clause. You might also want to include a clause that says, if the tenant doesn't move out, the buyer is going to assume the tenant. So keep you should have that as well. And once the unit is sold, you want to serve the N12 notice right away to the tenant, and you also want to file an L2 with the landlord and tenant board. L2 just says that you've given notice to the tenant, and you're starting the eviction process. So if they don't move out by themselves, you're that much further ahead with the application to evict them. You could also sign an N11 form with the tenant. N11 is agreement to end tenancy. So it's not a notice, it's an agreement. So the tenant will need to sign. And once the tenant signs that and you sign it, you file an L3 with the landlord tenant board so that they know that you two have an agreement. And if the tenant doesn't move out, you can start the eviction process as well. And so the last point is, it's something called cash for keys. That's what I said in the previous slide, where some landlord are paying the tenant $20,000, $30,000. Here I'm suggesting same thing, that you as a landlord, be prepared to pay the tenant off. You have to pay minimum 1 month as per the law, but if you give them more money, there's a good chance that they will take the money and move to somewhere else, because they know they can't stay much longer anyways. You're selling it, the buyers want to move in, they're going to be evicted. So a lot of them will rather take the money and move out right away. So that is our topic for this week. I'm going to make a more in-depth video regarding this topic at a later time. But I hope what the little bit of a summary or a little bit of tidbits I gave you was helpful for you. And again, it's Steven Sun, the Homes by Sun with Remax. And thank you so much for watching this. And I really appreciate all the support, all the good comments I've received in the past. I will see you in the next video. Next week, we're going to come back and look at what's happening with the real estate market this week. Bye for now and have a wonderful week. Take care.